Hello, and welcome to the Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, where we go book by book through the giant library of Dragonlance books. With me, as always, is my good friend, Shivam.
Hello. The giant library of 1.5 books that we've done in the 3 years of this show.
We'll get there. Today, we are at
You didn't introduce yourself.
I'm Jonathan Howard.
And as always, you can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast. That is what helps us stay on the air and pay for our, hosting and whatnot.
And all those library books I got to buy. Some of those books are expensive at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out 25 years out of date or 30 years out of print, whatever, it makes it very hard. But we love doing this. We love talking about Dragonlance, and this is just a nice diversion. Talking about Dragonlance makes me happy, which is why I enjoy doing this show so much. And I don't really have a lot of chance to do it anymore because we don't have the mailing list like we used to do. We don't have the message boards like we used to do. We have like the Facebook group, the various Dragonlance Facebook groups, but they're
not as active.
Yeah. One of the things about the Facebook group is that it's a lot of the same people that I've been discussing Dragonlance with since I was 15 years old or whatever. And I know what all of them have to say about every topic. We have all had our opinions ossified in sand and rock for generations now. But that's okay, because honestly, I don't care. I do this because me and John like to talk about Dragonlance, and this is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
And today is one of literally my favorite chapters in the entirety of Chronicles.
Today, we're starting with Chapter 5 of Book 3 of Dragons of Winter Night, Gnome Flingers.
Gnome Flingers. Tell me that's not like the most evocative possible chapter title you could think of, especially when you tie it with that insane artwork that's right there in the cover, which is like this diagram of a catapult.
Yeah, it's like a Rube Goldberg's version of a catapult.
I think one of my favorite parts is that in one of the art books or something, there's like a Larry Elmore sketch of this schematic, and it says, in certain configurations, catapult flips itself over and smashes the operator. It's in committee. Oh my God. But Jeff Grubb, what he did with this series was creating the Tinker Gnomes is one of the coolest possible things ever. I mean, we talked about it last time around, I think, or the time before when we started to talk about Tinker Gnomes. But just like, man, I love the gnomes so much. And this time getting to go into their stronghold, understand what's going on. And the first time you hear them speaking, the first time you get their names, it's just like, oh man, this is so rad.
It's wild to me when you read this chapter and you're like, they're somehow the most bureaucratic, but also the most insane. Like, if anything should get caught in committee, it's a gnome flinger. But nope, they fully integrated gnome flingers into their way of life.
Oh yeah, like you would think like they had a discussion, I'm sure, but that's the one thing about gnomes is once the committee had decided something, they all go along with it. Like they're all totally like, hey, you know what? This seems like a reasonable idea to somebody. Let's just stamp it and build them. I fully believe that the early gnomes had some more efficient people who were just willing to build things, and everybody else has just kind of been working off templates ever since. The first gnomes that Rarix created had that genetic makeup of just like, eventually we should build something. Okay, we'll build it. And nowadays they're just kind of locked in just this treadmill of ridiculousness. Like, for instance, the fact that one of my favorite gnome things ever, which is tangentially Dragonlance, is that in Spelljammer was the space pirate setting that was meant to unify the planes before Plane Chase came along for all of the different planes of D&D. And they wanted to take different chunks of various planes and bring them in. For instance, they brought in the Illithids from, Greyhawk or whatever, and they brought this and that and the other thing. The thing they chose to bring from Dragonlance was like, okay, well, who from Dragonlance would be the most likely to go to space? And they're like, well, of course, it'd be the Tinker Gnomes, right? Because, like, we want to, infect the rest of the known multiverse with Tinker Gnomes. But then they're like, okay, well, how are Tinker Gnomes going to get to space? They're not just going to build a rocket ship or anything. Okay, well, if I wanted to build a motor that would launch me somewhere, what's the best thing I could do? And they were like, a hamster wheel. Let's take a hamster wheel because it spins and spins. The hamster runs. You put a little carrot in front of it. It'll just keep running and running and making motion. And then they're like, okay, well, these hamsters are too small. What if we made them gigantic? And that's when you get the giant space hamsters that are used to drive the energy of the gnomish spaceships in Spelljammer.
Is that what Boo is from?
Boo is a miniature giant space hamster. Because Minsk believes fully that Boo is like, the apotheosis of hamsters, and he is like, oh yeah, this guy totally came from space. Is totally a mini giant. He's a hamster. It's standard, bog standard hamster. However, how do you know he's not a miniature giant space hamster?
I didn't realize that they were referencing actual giant space hamsters from Spelljammer. I did not know that.
That's what makes Boo amazing. That's why Minsk Boo is like, my favorite magic card. It's like, oh my God. Minsk Boo is so good. But yeah, the gnomes and the giant space hamsters, actually, give me 10 seconds here. I'm going to pull something up that I wrote once. I'm going to talk about giant space hamsters for a second because guess what? I can. So let's talk about Minsk and Boo that show up in Baldur's Gate, right? Like they show up in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and then show up in Baldur's Gate 3 because everybody loves Minsk and Boo. And Minsk is, like a neutral good human ranger. You can get him into your party. He's fine. And sometimes in his past, he took a bunch of blows to the head and is kind of absent-minded, right? Like he's not exactly all there. This is known. And we know this because, his int stat is 9. 10 is the baseline for humans. 9 means that your egg has kind of been a little scrambled, right? Minsk has this companion, his boon companion, his true best friend, his, soulmate, Boo, a hamster that he carries with him. And his signature move is obviously go for the eyes, Boo, while Minsk throws his hamster at you. But Minsk believes that Boo isn't a mere hamster. No, Minsk believes that Boo is a giant space hamster that's been miniaturized. And everyone's like, what the hell, Boo? It's like, but Minsk is beloved, and if he wants his hamster to be a space hamster, it doesn't hurt anybody. That's fine. Why would he think that? What's a space hamster? And to understand that, we have to pull all the way back to the settings eye view of the entire cosmos of the D&D. This is one of those, like, to create a loaf of bread, you must first create the universe type of stories. So back in the beginning of D&D, we had the default setting of Orth, which was Gary Gygax's Greyhawk. And we had the modules and stuff, and people would make their own settings, and people would kind of spin off and make their own D&D versions. And one of these was a dude from Toronto, a young man named Ed Greenwood. And he started playing D&D and creating stories in a place called Waterdeep and Shadowdale, and started writing articles about this setting he built in the official D&D magazine, Dragon. And Greenwood wrote a lot, like reams and reams and reams. The articles were amazing and thick, and they made a reader think that there was a huge world beyond these pages here. And so D&D is going along, and they've got these settings, Greyhawk, and they've got the known world, aka Mistro, which is this world inside of the shell of a different world, which is super cool. And, in 1984, Tracy Hickman comes up with I6 Ravenloft and then conceives of Dragonlance. Obviously the world we've been talking about. Now, Dragonlance obviously is not the first connected module series, but it's the first one that was built with an overarching plot where the players really couldn't deviate from. It was like the early modules had been really open-ended sandboxes with a lot of room for exploration. And Dragonlance was instead like, what if we make a novel, a full 16-volume modular track that would carry a party from 1 to 20 and then lead them to fighting against a dark world to bring the powers of the divine back alongside Spark of Hope. It was singularly amazing and unique experience. It was cinematic and it was pulp. And I mean, we've been talking about it for a year and a half. Y'all know what Dragonlance is, right? But it was also very, very constrained because Hickman didn't want the tropes of D&D in his series. So there were no orcs, there were no illithids, beholders, none of the gods and named figures of like Greyhawk or the other settings, no halflings, and a much more tight-knit pantheon. And TSR was looking for a new home base to anchor their core modules and act as a default setting. And they looked at Dragonlance and the novels and stories and decided it was amazing and incredible, but it was way too tightly interwoven and kind of just like it was way too...
It was too defined.
Yeah, it was too defined and too closed to actually do anything with. And so 1986, Jeff Grubb, who is one of the lead designers of D&D modules and author of a lot of Dragonlance novels and settings and stuff, he's looking around for a new setting because he works at TSR. Greyhawk doesn't work because of political reasons. Gary Gygax divorced his ex. His ex runs TSR. They don't want to deal with that. Dragonlance doesn't work because it's too squeaky, Mormon, and clean. Grubb starts reading old Dragon issues and he finds the works of Ed Greenwood. According to the lore of the internet, Jeff goes to Ed and says, do you just make this up as you go or do you have a huge campaign world? And Greenwood's like, yes. And yes. TSR is like, damn, dude, this is voluminous. So they choose realms to be the new default setting of D&D. This is why in second edition and forward, Forgotten Realms was a core setting of Dungeons & Dragons. It was a huge world, epic, open, full of infinite variety. And unlike Dragonlance, it had blank space all over the place so that people could put their own ideas in worlds in. Because Dragonlance, when you run a campaign in Dragonlance, you're running a Dragonlance campaign, right? Like, even if you're making your own stories, it's still hard to find a spot that hasn't already been told. You can do it, but not nearly as much as the Forgotten Realms, where it's just like entire, continents are just like open for whatever you want. It was big enough that TSR could almost import the entirety of Greyhawk onto Forgotten Realms wholesale. Like Lolth, like all the different drow, all the creatures and stuff could go there straight. Players were like, how does this work? Like, how do you bring all these things in? And well, when you have gods and demons and monsters in the world, how do you connect them? And so they came up with the idea of planes. And so D&D creates a multiverse, a system called the Great Wheel, which is one of my favorite kind of like maps of D&D. In the center, there's this thing called concordant opposition, and then there's a whole host of planes all around it with ethereal, astral, various heavens and hells, and the abyss, and all these other things where all these different gods go and live. And it's this really complicated looking kind of wheel map, and it's super cool. And high-level mages could make portals and stuff and go through the various portals and passages to get between worlds. But Krynn, because it's so different, is sealed off in its own cosmos and unconnected to the Great Wheel. Also, because of internal TSR politics and just beef between designers. This is why you have name spells like, Big B's Hand and Tasha's Laughter and whatever in Forgotten Realms and in Greyhawk and in Mystra and everything. Because like all of these mages were able to transport themselves all over and teach other people how to do their spells. But that's why you don't have like Dalamar's Lightning Lance or whatever showing up in other places. And, Forgotten Realms had more demons and angel beholders and all this stuff. And it was just like, and I was mad about it because I'm a DL fanboy all the way through and through. But in hindsight, yeah, it's way smarter to pick the open setting to be the one for D&D. So here we are at the end of the 80s and the 90s, and the D&D scare happens, and suddenly angels and devils and evil gods are bad. D&D scrubs them out. Dragonlance, made by the devout Mormon trade statement, already kind of pre-cleaned, so it escapes a lot of scrutiny. And Plane Chase hasn't really happened yet because it's deeper into the edgy 90s. But the idea of interplanar travel is still there, and they needed to do it in a way that wouldn't have people being like, oh, there's demons here. So Jeff Grubb is tasked with finding a solution. He reaches back into the history of pulp novels from like the, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Phlogiston, or whatever
Phlogiston, the
ethereal.
Yeah, it's like the Greek schmutz that exists between space. Because he comes up with space pirates, right? So he's got, the planes aren't just independent worlds connected by the astral plane. They're crystal spheres floating in the phlogiston, a big ocean of something flammable that spans the multiverse. And so it kind of like, if you ever play the game Star Control 2, it looks a lot like that, where it's just like there's little holes in this big morass that lead you into the solar systems and planes that exist. But then there's also just this kind of goop. And the way to travel through it is these things called space jamming helms, which are basically big galleons and big frigates that fly through space. And they even looked like galleons of frigates. They looked super rad. Like the Nautiluses of the Illithids were just these really sick looking ships. And then they also had like the greatest race of all time, the GIF, the big giant hippos with blunderbusses and cigars and like pipes and everything. Jeff Grubb comes up with the pulp space pirates and plops them into all the settings that exist within a Spelljam framework. And you've got Realm Space, Gray Space, Krynn Space. And Krynn Space is immediately declared non-canonical by Dragonlance because it broke the rules of all things that made Dragonlance unique and brought in stuff that we'd all kept strictly out, right? And Spelljammer and Planescape, they decided to strike back by calling Krynn a desolate backwood full of ignorant scrubs that nobody wanted to go to anyways. And it was literally just because two designers sitting next to each other got beefy at each other. And because of that, we have like generations of angry fanboy wars. And of course, like, Jeff Grubb is intimately familiar with the deal. He created the Pantheon for Dragonlance. He's been written a ton of stuff. He knew exactly what he was doing. So Realms is like, okay, Realms and Spelljam are like, sure, Krynn's okay. So how do we bring this in? So back in the 70s, we had the D&D races, right? We had humans, elves, dwarves, halflings, half-orcs, half-elves, and gnomes. So basically, all the races that were in a Tolkien book and gnomes. And gnomes were weird because all the other ones Tolkien had come up with a backstory for and they made sense. But gnomes are like, elves are forest magics and dwarves are underground craft people and halflings are thieves, etc. What do gnomes do? What do you think?
I mean, I think of David the gnome, like it's like a little garden gnome kind of thing.
Exactly that. Because basically that's what they did. They were little dudes with pointed hats who talked to badgers.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. In basically, they were a joke without a punchline. Like nobody could figure out what they're here for. And Tracy Hickman was like, well, if we're going to have gnomes, we should do something cool with it. And orcs they didn't want because they're stale enemies all over the place. Halflings were out because Hickman hated the idea of a race that was just kleptomaniacal thieves, amoral burglars. And well, gnomes are just like, what the hell are the gnomes doing? Well, Dragonlance was unique among these modules because there was a novel line that told the same story. And part of that was that Dragonlance had a deep and well-developed world before the modules even came out, so that the novels could have something to base off of. So the team at TSR, which is Tracy, Margaret, Jeff Grubb, Doug Niles, Harold Johnson, others, and they tried to figure out how much of D&D they could shove into Tracy's plan. And Jeff Grubb, who was the true hero here, he was a civil engineer before he became one of my all-time favorite designers. And Grubb sits down with Hickman and Niles and works out what to do. They come up with the Draconians, the magic system, Pantheon, the Kenders, and a race of flustered civil engineers whose projects always do weird things. This race obviously goes on to change the face of gaming forever because it created an archetype that would be used for the gnomes in Western gaming, the Tinker Gnomes of Krynn, And they weren't just the little forest dwellers who sang songs to burrowing mammals, wore pointy red hats. They were now a race of tinkers and inventors, folks who were cursed with a drive to create, innovate, and develop, but never got it to work. Their inventions were Rube Goldberg monstrosities, steam-driven nose hair trimmers and lava-powered automatic carpet cleaners that also made toast. There's the inside of the Dragonlance Adventures, there's a whole chart of like how to make a gnomish machine, like a flow chart with different choices of where it's going to explode. It was insane. It's so sick. And it's so funny. It's like, and there's like success and failures, and maybe next episode I'll read some of those, but like we end up with this race of mad scientists who build insane inventions that have all sorts of unintended consequences, and they're immediately popular. Even the realms started slowly changing their gnomes from the badgers to tinkers with like Gond and the other things like that. And obviously World of Warcraft stole it wholesale, and then everybody else did. But like Spelljammer, Jeff Grubb is trying to make an interplanar universe, and he goes back and he's like, who is the best possible race for this? And he's like, of course it's going to be the civil engineers of space, right? So they're a magically resistant race. They can't use normal Spelljammer helms because Spelljammers are driven by magic. So in true gnomish fashion, they send it to committee. And they have arguments, explosions, innovations, inspirations, and they come up with the perfect design, a big wheel tied to their thrust engines. I mean, it works for water mills. And so how do you run a wheel? So originally they grabbed teams of gnomes to run together, but this had problems, namely that the gnomes kept getting tired asynchronously and would either trip their companions or get flung out of the wheel and crushed in the gears. So they go back to committee. What kind of passive animal could they use that would run in a wheel for a long, long time? Well, they come up with selective breeding program and years of painful research to create a breed of rodents that were perfectly content to run in giant wheels for hours at a time. These harnessed astronomical mammalian semi-sentient transportation enabling rodents, or hamsters for short, were immediately bred to the size of bears and set to work. They provided a food source that would spread through the multiverse called space hamster meat, or spaham. Eventually, TSR decided that space pirates floating through glop with giant hamsters and British hippos being chased by angry squid men was maybe a bridge too far and lacked the centralized hub for PCs to congregate in, so they created Planescape and shelved Spelljammer. But in Ed Greenwood's realms, nothing is ever forgotten and nothing is ever too much. So these space gnomes and their Rodentia gigantus found their way to the lores and legends of Faerun. And so at the campaign of BioWare designer James Olhen, a mentally unstable ranger with his pet hamster was born, and finding his way from there into the first major D&D video game in decades, Baldur's Gate. And from there, Minsk and Boo become the heroes of everybody's hearts and games. Because turns out having a miniature giant space hamster that is butt-kicking for justice is maybe the greatest thing of all time. So yeah, I love gnomes. I love the tinkers. I love giant space hamsters so much.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot.
I can't believe I just read a 20-minute essay to you.
That might be a bonus part of the podcast.
Anyways, I love the first sentence of the Gnome Flinger chapter, which is Fizban talking to Taz, right? And he's like, now remember, no gnome, living or dead, has ever in history, ever in his life, completed a sentence. The only way you get anywhere is to interrupt them. Don't worry about being rude. They expect it. That's a hell of a way to start a chapter, man. There we go. Here we are. Taz studies the gnome, and he's never seen a gnome before, which makes sense. They generally tend to congregate in their volcano or in small colonies around.
He's like the first Kender, right? He's the first Kender to get there.
No.
Oh, I figured he was because they take his Hupok staff because they've never seen it before.
You haven't seen one recently.
Got it.
The Kender and Hylo live on northern Urgoth, which is very close to here.
Okay.
And there's no way that Kender have not showed up here many, many times.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But it's Gnosh probably hadn't seen a Hupok before.
Okay.
Taz brings up the Grey Gem stories where, like, you know, the curious Kender become the curious dwarves become Kender, and the curious gnomes become Kender, and the greedy gnomes become dwarves. And he's like, this guy doesn't really look like me, but they're kind of Kenderish. They're slender and have bright eyes, but then they're also like serious and businesslike.
This is the first mention of the Grey Gem in the books? I think so. I don't think the Grey Gem's been mentioned in Autumn or until now, was it?
I feel it must have been because I know we've talked about it.
Well, I think we talked about it because we've just talked about the races and how they're different and where they came from. I'll have to go back and see if, unless you have a searchable index. I thought this was, especially when it's called like the Grey Gem of Gargoth, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. When does it show up? Let's see.
This was them dropping, you know, all those hooks that they could pick up later if they wanted.
That's a good. I don't think it's the first time. I think even talking about Kender themselves must have showed up at some point.
Well, ask the fans. I'm sure one of them knows. Taz tries to introduce himself and Fizban, and the gnome just like takes his Hupok and he's like, wow, what's this? We'll need to send it to the committee.
Exactly. I love this, that he reaches behind him, or rather the guard who's standing there, reaches behind him and pulls a whistle that shrieks. And the whistle that I'm imagining is basically like if you've ever seen the old, like, you know, Looney Tunes cartoons where they're checking into work and they're like the steam-driven whistles that...
Those steam whistles, yeah.
Yeah. Where you pull the string and then just like, howdy, Sam. And then they go off in their foghorn, leghorn, and like the Roadrunner or whatever. Taz is suddenly like, what the hell's going on? What is this whistle? I've never heard anything like it. And hey, come back with my Hupok. And his staff is being carried off by three things. And then I'm like, examination room on Skimbosh. And he's like, I beg your pardon? You've got to speak slower, because like the gnomes speak without spaces. They do not put spaces between their words because that is inefficient. When he does, the gnome that they're talking to is like, I will try and remember, so please do not worry. And because every single word suddenly becomes specifically enunciated, which is just like robotic and super annoying. But yeah, we get into this fun part of this chapter here. Taz makes the greatest mistake any person can make talking to a gnome, which is, what's your name? There's multiple schools of thought here. One is that in Chronicles, when we're introduced to the gnomes, their names are their entire ancestral history linked in a line. However, this is a little weird because like Gnosh is like, oh yeah, my great grandmother Gnosh did blah, blah, blah. But the weird thing is because their given name would be appended all the way at the end. Right? Because it's the first one at the name is Gnosh, who married blah, 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 who married blah, 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 who married. And like this whole lineage going down. So calling himself Gnosh, because like, you know, he starts listing off his lineage. And then Fizban's like, what's the short version? And then he starts listing off his lineage again. Then he's like, what do the knights call you? And he's like, Gnosh.
Yeah.
And he's super irritated about that because, yeah, that's not his name. His name is the name 3 miles down the line at the end, not the one at the beginning. I think that's always one of the things that's always irritated me about this specific kind of naming convention is that, like, that's not how it works, dog. They're like, your name should be the thing at the end. Then why do you even have, like, long ass names if you're going to just stick with the first 2 syllables you see? But then I just chalk that up to, you know, Slavonic racism.
That's why Fizban finally says, like, what do the knights call you? He's like, I don't actually care what your name is. I just want to know the shortest version.
Right? It's so irritating.
The knights aren't going to really care about your name. So when they talk to you, what do they call you? That's what I'll do too.
Yeah. And like you see Gnosh just being like, and it says right here, oh, the gnome seemed downcast. And then Fizban's like, thank you. He snapped. And I'm like, you snapped? Man, what the hell, Paladine? Don't be an asshole. This guy's trying to tell you his name. I have a lot of hangups about names. I think his names are very, very important. And I think that being brusque and dismissive like this is really, really messed up. And I don't like that at all. But one of the other things they do is you see this in, especially one of my favorite novels ever, Darkness and Light. The gnomes have their life quests as their names, which is like, you know, building the guy, like the whistle that blows really loudly upon, you know, entering this device and blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, what do you name? It's like, bird whistle, you know, or something like that. And like they contract the mission statement of their job into their shortened name. And then there's like also just keyboard smash, which is just like long string of things. Because the gnomes have their own innate gnomish language, but people don't go into it. Nobody really cares.
Yeah.
Except for me.
So Fizban says like, hey, we're here for the dragon orb. And Nosh is like, well, why? And Fizban's like, I'm a magic user. And then Nosh is more interested in him again. Because as you were saying, they don't know magic. They don't do magic.
Well, because the inherent like fixture of the gray gem that said that the races created by the gray gem were not able to be magic users or like had a kind of innate protection from magic. That's kind of their way of like also D&D rulesing into the like, oh, dwarves don't use magic. They've got magic resistance. Gnomes don't use magic. But it's not true because in first edition, gnomes were illusionists. What's going on here? But that's why they made the gnomes the top level race. Because then when they have the descendant races, the Kender and the dwarves, they can say, oh, these guys don't have magic because the Grey Gem tinkered with them and neutered that ability. That's one of the things, like gnomish illusionists are like the big gnomey thing that they did in every other setting at the time. But in Dragonlance, they were just like, we're just not going to deal with that. Because illusion magic was its own separate kind of school of magic in the first edition book, and it was weird. And in second edition, they kind of just folded into all the schools together. But the point is, gnomes in Dragonlance are the technical race, the crafter race. They do not have any magical aptitude. They do not have any magical skill. And they don't understand it because they're like, we're here for science. We're here for, repeatable functioning rationalism. This doesn't work. So like when Fizban's like, I'm a magician who wants to talk about the dragon orb, they're like, hell yeah, this thing is obviously a magic rock and I don't know what to do with it. You want to come? Let's go look.
So they said they're going to take him to the examination room. And then Fizban and Taz talk a little bit about the orbs.
Yeah.
I feel like we have this conversation every chapter where they're like, what are the orbs?
Mm-hmm.
And Fizban is like, they're not good. They're not evil, but they are weird. They are strange. And he's like, they're nothing and they're everything. I thought it was really interesting because he's basically saying, as you said before, the dragon orb is whatever it needs to be for the purposes of the story.
It is. He just uses some very mystical gobbledygook here to kind of just hand wave him over Taz's head. Part of it is the author is just saying like, I don't care. Who cares? Whatever it does.
It's whatever the orb needs to be.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be for the purpose of the story.
But then it's also like Fizban just being like, again, very dismissive to like, you don't need to know, Taz.
Yeah, it's not important.
You specifically, the details are not important to you. And if I tell you this is going to lead, it's like talking to a child. It's like, if I tell you that this thing is going to cause fire to happen, you are going to be curious and want that to happen.
That's his big fear also for the gnomes. He's like, my main big fear is that one of them might try to use the orb.
Right? Because why not? I'm sure they've got some machine somewhere that lets them translate magic into energy.
So they keep going on, and then Taz, still trying to be polite, asks Gnosh what his name means.
Yeah, and so in the beginning, the gods created the gnomes, and one of the first they created was named Gnosh, and Gnosh won, and these are the notable events that occurred in his life. He married Marion and Nihilus, and Taz's like, wait, how long is your name? And it's like, it fills a book this big in the library. It said gnome holding his hand up, because we're a very old family, and you'll see when I continue. Oh, that's all right, Taz said quickly. And then he stumbles over a rope. And then Gnosh helps him up to his feet, and Taz looks up, and he sees a rope is connected to a nest of ropes connected to each other, snaky out in all the dimensions, and he wondered where they laid, foreshadowing. And he's like, perhaps another time. And Gnosh's like, well, perhaps there's some good parts. Taz's like, yeah, but no time.
I like this funny. There are some good parts to my name. Like, wait till you get to my middle name. Wow, it's going to really impress you.
They go there to the transport area. A Gnosh pulls a cable, a whistle blows, two bells and a gong ring out, and then a tremendous blast of steam that, parboils the whole group. And then the doors open. And when they do,
they get stuck.
Yeah. And then everybody's like, crap. Because like a steam-driven steel door seems like something's going to rust. I don't know. But Taz is like, what in the hell is going on?
We get this fantastic description of what Mount Nevermind is.
Yeah.
And when Taz decides that whenever this adventure is over, he wants to come back here. And we see that the Gnomish city was built within the old shaft of a dome volcano. And it's tiers upon tiers on the sides of this big hole.
Layers.
Yeah. Tiers and tiers going up to the top of the dome, all the way down. And it's like goes miles high, 35 levels up. And it must go down a number of levels as well until it gets to the lava, because all this is powered by the...
Yeah, by the innate like magma down at the bottom, right? Like, that's cool that they're like the first geothermal energy source in Krynn.
Taz goes, "Oh, there must be so many stairs," and then Gnosh just laughs at him.
Yeah, he's like, we're not climbing, buddy. Nobody's climbing that many stairs to get up to the top.
What's that? Where we're going? What is that? There's that goofy line where we're going. There are no.
It's from yeah, we don't need stairs. You know, it's like,
Yeah, where we're going, we don't need stairs.
yeah, thank you, Back to the Future. Where we're going, we don't need roads. It's wild though, because like they've got this basically this center shaft down the middle of the volcano, and they've built floors all the way around it. And how are you going to go up and down? And Taz says the funniest thing. Taz's like, "Oh man, I hate to live on 35th. How many stairs do you have to climb?" And Nosh sniffed. "Primitive devices we improved upon long ago, and now," he gestured, "view some of the marvels of technology we have operating." And Taz's like, "I can see. Wow, you must be preparing for a great battle. I've never seen so many catapults in my life." The Kender's voice died. Even as he watched, a whistle blew, the catapult went off with a twang, and a gnome went sailing through the air. Taz wasn't looking at machines of war, he was looking at the devices that replaced the stairs. The bottom floor of the chamber was filled with catapults, every type of catapult ever conceived by gnomes. There were sling catapults, crossbow catapults, willow-sprung catapults, steam-driven catapults, which are still experimental because they're working on adjusting the water temperature. And then surrounding the catapults, over the catapults, under the catapults, and through the catapults were strung miles and miles of rope, which operated a crazy assortment of gears and wheels and pulleys, all turning and tweaking and cranking. Out of the floor, out of the machines themselves, thrusting out from the sides of the walls were huge levers, which scores of gnomes were either pushing or pulling, or sometimes both at once. "I don't suppose," Fizban asked in a hopeless voice, "that the examination room would be on the ground floor?"
Nope, it is on floor 15.
Gimbosh, baby, let's go. And Taz is like, "I have never wanted to do something more in my life." He jumps into the seat of a huge sling catapult, staring up eagerly into the shaft, and he can see all the gnomes peering down from the balconies, all surrounded by great machines and ropes and huge shapeless things hanging from the sides of the walls like bats. Nosh is like, "Get out, man. Elders first."
And Fizban's like, "No, really, it's okay. I know a spell."
"Yeah, I can levitate. It's fine. I'll just grow some wings, get my dragon out." And Nosh is like, "You're the one in the hurry, buddy. Get in the cup." Fizban takes a seat, and the gnome operating the lever then that launches the catapult yells something at Nosh, which is like, where? And Nosh is like, "Skimbosh." And then the chief goes over, standing from a bunch of 5 levers, and rings one of them. That signals a bell on Skimbosh level to tell them to escape an arrival. And Fizban's like, "What happens if the bell doesn't ring?" "Oh, well, the emergency alarm bell will ring." "And what if the second bell doesn't ring?" "Oh, well, that's Skimbosh's problem."
Yeah, so they have like this series of nets that fling out to catch people. Taz is like, "Well, what happens if it fails?" And they're like, "Well, then the net below springs. And what happens if that fails?" Well, then you see the final thing is dump a large amount of sponges on the ground floor to soften the landing.
Yeah.
And then it says, if that also fails, then water is dumped on the floor. And with the sponges already there, well, cleanup is at least easier.
This is like just so funny because, Fizban goes sailing through the air, and Nosh is like, "Oh dear, it appears the net's open too soon. Oh, it's the second time today. This is going to have to be brought up in the net committee." Taz stares open-mouthed as Fizban is whizzing through the air, propelled from below by the tremendous force of the catapult. Suddenly, Kender sees what Nosh is talking about. The net on level 15, instead of opening when the mage had flown past and catching him as he starts to fall, opened before the mage got there, rolled back up, and then, Fizban hits the net that's already rolled up and bounces off. And then another net tries to open and it misses, and he starts just like, careening down like in a cartoon.
Finally, he's caught at level 9.
It's like just watching one of the pinballs go ping, 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 ping. So they get back up there eventually. They make it to 15. They go into the examination room, which is currently just empty, and there's a couple of tables. And one of them's got a hoopock on it, and one of them's got the dragon orb. They go in there, and Nosh is like, "Oh man, my life quest is the dragon orb." And Taz's like, "What the hell's a life quest?" Well, life quests are one of the other favorite parts of gnomes, which is that each of them at birth is given a quest of some either designed to create a problem to solve, engineering solution to do, or like some magical object to explore or discover. It's like when you're doing character creation, it's one of my favorite things is to come up with a life quest, because then you've got like a whole built-in plot kind of device to go around.
It's passed on.
Oh yeah, and if you fail your life quest, it goes on to your kids and their kids and their kids. Because Tad's like, what do you mean Dragon Orb is your life quest? How do you even know? It's like, well, it was my father's and his father's. You mean they live their whole lives without seeing a dragon orb? Well, I mean, yeah, it happens. We know about them because we know about everything because we're gnomes.
You can't go into the afterlife until you fulfilled it, or until your descendants have fulfilled it. So all of Nosh's ancestors are like, in purgatory.
Well, I mean, presumably his ancestors it says only up to his grandfather. That means before that, they had figured out their various sundry life quests.
There's a knight there guarding the orb. He just seems bored. And Fizban goes directly to the orb. He starts muttering unknown words and puts his hands on it. And as soon as he does, the orb goes black. And he tells everyone to leave. And the knight refuses, so Fizban puts him to sleep, and then the rest of the gnomes run away.
Yeah, they're just like, hell no, we're done.
And Gnosh now is like, oh no, I won't be able to complete my life quest if this guy takes it. And Taz is like, it'll be okay. Everything's for the best.
Yeah. But Fizban also says something really interesting here. Come with me, my boy, he said to the gnome, and do not worry, your life quest will be fulfilled. And I'm like, man, that right there is, divine sanctity right there. It's like, the God of gods is sitting there saying, like, I mean, yeah, obviously Gnosh doesn't know who Fizban is, but Fizban does, and he's like, look, man, for your help in this matter, I will assure that all of your generations going backwards and forwards have attained nirvana, so just chill, it'll be fine.
It's funny that he says it, because as we see in the something happens in the next chapter that would lead you to believe that he is not going to complete his life quest.
Exactly, but it's such a Hindu notion here, because like when we like do our ceremonies and stuff, like all the ancient rituals are for the matter of attaining enlightenment or trying to, get to heaven or do whatever it is, honor the gods, something like that. And so when we're doing weddings, for instance, we've got this concept of dan, which is an offering that you make, a donation, a gift, a giving. And when you offer things, you get things back, right? Like that's an old transactional religion. But when you're doing a wedding, you as parents are offering your child to this other family, and which is the greatest, offering you can give, because it's someone you've invested time, money, and 18 years of your life and your blood and your sweat and your family lineage into this person. And by making this offering of this person to the gods to, fulfill their family desire, you're attaining salvation for 7 generations backwards and forwards, is what the kind of part of the ceremony itself says. So, like, when I sit here and, Fizban, Paladine, is telling Gnosh, your life quest will be fulfilled, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, look, you've been just granted nirvana, because, like, you see in reading the Hindu fables and stuff, whenever, like, somebody assists, like, Ram or Krishna or whatever during the stories, the touch of the Lord immediately frees them from the bonds of, misery that we're stuck here with, and they attain nirvana and they are given the grand reward. Gnosh here is fulfilling an incredibly important function, and Fizban is just like, look, in honor and in gratitude for what you are performing here, even though this is not going to go the way you want it to go, I am preemptively granting you salvation because you are so fundamental, even though you don't know what you're doing. And I was like, that's a really moving moment.
And I also took the whole life quest thing in a very Mormon direction, because the members of the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, they do ordinances for the dead. There's this whole thing where if, say, LDS people believe that you need to have certain things done in order to get to heaven, the best heaven. If you don't do them in this lifetime, they still have to be done. And so what they do is they do baptisms for the dead. And in those big temples you see, those big Mormon temples, that's what they do. They do baptisms for the dead. They do something called endowments, and they do eternal marriage is what they do, called sealings.
Yeah.
That's what this made me think of it, is that, Nosh's father and grandfather couldn't do it, but by Gnosh doing the work, it like does the work for them. In Mormonism, they talk about how you'll bind the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to the fathers all the way back to Adam. Like it's an eternal chain where everyone is in this family. And that's why they're really big on, it's called temple work. And the reason they're big on doing genealogy, right? They own ancestry.com, is for that thing. They take all those names, and then they have people in the Mormon Church go do that work. They go and baptize people. The whole way that they see it is that, those people are in a place like purgatory, and you've done the work for them here, and then they can accept it, and then they go from purgatory into one of the better places. It's a very...
Yeah, it's like, look, I'm trying to help you, even though you can't help yourself. But it's also, on one side, it feels very like genuine, like, look, dude, I'm doing something that is important for you. And on the other side, it feels patronizing, which is like, you see a lot of like controversy where the Jewish people are like, don't go and baptize my ancestors.
Yeah.
Like, they're Jews.
The LDS Church has gotten in trouble a number of times when people have found out that like they've taken people who died in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Not just Jewish people, but all sorts of
The list of names, yeah.
Poles and they've done all that work, and then those people say like, what are you doing? Like, this is
desecration of our ancestors, it's like,
yeah, like you don't get to say you're kind of co-opting. You don't get to do that. That's ours. Those are my ancestors. They died because they were Jewish. You don't get to afterwards come along and say, well, they're Mormon now and they're in a better place. It's like, no, that's not how this works.
We should table that talk because I've got a lot of thoughts on that.
It's just interesting that the life quest seemed that way, is that the work he did. Yeah.
No, it does. You're right, though, because the way they frame it here, which is like, my ancestors are just waiting for me to finish this, is that action definitely feels like that, where it's like, if you don't, then your child will. If they don't, their child will. Eventually someone will, and then all of you will be, freed.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to me. And then there's also the theological thing of like, does Paladine saying this matter to the worshippers of Reorx, or is there like a divine like defiling system where he just kind of stamps it and like sends it through? What's going on here? Like,
theologically, can Paladine grant?
Yeah, can Paladine grant the worshipper of someone else salvation? What does that mean? Like, you just got to sit there. It's like, is it like getting a permission slip from your doctor or something like that to miss school or whatever?
I have a out of network pass from my insurance company to use. So I'll just I got this from Paladine and I'll take it to Reorc, and he's like, oh, well, we have a reciprocal agreement.
Or is it like getting your degree in a different country and being like, okay, yeah, we accept your credentials. But yeah, so Fizban, though, has this deep, dark like look on his face, and everybody's like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah, Taz says he doesn't look like himself. He notices that Fizban doesn't look like himself. So we're seeing, again, hints at character of Fizban dropped away when he's doing this work with the orb.
Oh, yeah, the mask is coming off, man. They're sitting outside waiting. Taz is like, so what did you see inside the orb? And he's like, well, I saw something inside of it that I was trying to stare at it, and I'd see words swirling around and, this and that. He's like, could you read them? I was like, oh, I couldn't, but probably someone in the foreign language guild could. But then, the door blows open and Fizban comes out holding a small black bag in his hand and Taz's hoopah in his other hand. Gnosh is like upset and he's like, you got the orb. And he's so upset. You could tell he's upset because he says a full sentence that ends.
And then this is where Fizban reassures him and then says, you're going to come with us as we need to, Taz and I go to travel to the Council of Whitestone.
Yeah.
This great part here where Fizban tells Taz that like great events are about to come, caused by the decisions of a few folks, and that we need to use the orb. And Fizban looked into the future, and he says he saw two roads. One was easy and seemed to be the right choice, but darkness would fall at its end. The other would be difficult. It would cost the lives or souls of some they love, but only through such sacrifice would they find hope and succeed. And Fizban says he knows what has to be done to take the right road, but that the choices that lead to it are not up to him, right? So even like, again, this is like a God saying,
free will, baby.
Like, I know what has to happen, but I can't make it happen.
Right.
And Taz says it will probably be important people who make that decision. And then he realizes that people he loves might die. And he worries about his friends, especially Flint. He starts to cry. And Fizban comforts him and says, yes, important people will make this decision. Like, that's really poignant. We're going to see in the very next chapter who these important people are.
But I think that there's something really interesting here because first off, it shows you a couple of things. One is that the gods themselves do not know the future. The future in Dragonlance is ever changing, is ever mutable. And we see this a lot in Legends too, where Takhisis is like given knowledge of the future because she talks to Tasslehoff in the Abyss and understands what's going to happen, which is a terrifying, miserable thing to do. But Paladine here doesn't know, so he knows how to use the orb to channel, to see.
It's weird that the orb does know the future, or the orb can like...
The orb is just a conduit of power.
Yeah, the orb is just presenting scenarios. Like, it's running through all the different outcomes, and like the orb allows you to like look through all the potential choices.
Because like I think there's a combination of things here. One is that the fact that Paladine has the full divine power of creation behind him means he knows how to channel this energy through the orb to see the river of time, which currently the only person who could do that is Gillian, the god of balance. And he doesn't care about the future or the past. He cares about the now. Paladine can use this ability. Dude, this is also why it's a big deal to keep the dragon orbs out of Takhisis' hands, because she can also do this and see what's going to happen and see the possibilities. Because that's what Paladine's seeing. He's not seeing the future. He's seeing infinite array of possibilities. But because he's a god and also needs to explain to this mortal here what's going on, he could sit there and just say, like, look, there's good choices and bad choices. And he just metaphorically makes them into two roads because that's how Taz, the wanderer, is going to understand. The interesting thing here is that Fizban knows that he cannot directly cause this to happen. He needs, like, he can't, by the rules set on the gods themselves, can't interfere, but he's got to have the mortals do it, and he can manipulate the situation to get you places, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him use a dragon orb. So Paladine sits there and goes like, okay, well, Taz, I'm going to tell you things that are deeply meaningful, but I can't directly tell you anything, but I'm savvy enough to understand the keywords that'll cause you to do the things I need you to do.
I like how Elistan is supposed to be the chosen prophet of Paladine, but so far in these books, the most person who has a claim of being an avatar of Paladine is Tasslehoff.
Right? He's not an avatar, but he's like the tool of Paladine. He is like,
yeah, he's by far the most, like, he's not a member of the clergy. I don't even know if he worships Paladine. I don't know if he worships any gods, but he's the one so far who has been taking all the actions that need to be taken, right? He's the one who saw the dragon lances and then remembered it and told people about it. He's the one who's going to...
He has basically been the actual moving factor of the god in the machine. He is like, Fizban immediately picked him out of the entire company and said, you are going to be my chosen tool.
You are the chess piece I am moving on the board.
Right. Elistan might be the guy who's going to get the bureaucracy set up and get like the functioning clergy and church going. But upon this rock is Tasslehoff, right? Like Tasslehoff is the fisher of men over here. He's like,
yeah,
the one who's actually sitting there and doing the work and doing the action. It's very important to see that and realize that as we're going through, because that's why he keeps coming back over and over again. He has been blessed by Paladine directly and also is like protected by Paladine, because Paladine knows this guy is the one bastion of hope that is uncorruptible in the entire universe. He's the only functioning, like everybody else is depressed and dark and full of just, too many conflicting emotions for Paladine to be able to use him. Tasslehoff is just pure id and pure joy and hope. And he's like, I can set you free and know that my will be done somehow, eventually, circuitously. But it's better than nothing. It's like, and so that's why Fizban looks gray. Fizban is like, because there's this scene here. Fizban comes around and like Taz is looking at him. Fizban looks, haggard, gray, and he's tired. He needs to stop. And you're like, what happened? How can a god who's fully bodily here on Krynn be haggard and tired and need to stop and need to take a breath? What did he see that he can't reveal?
The mage's voice sounded tired, and Taz, looking at him closely, saw that he was on the verge of exhaustion. His skin was gray, his eyelids drooped. He leaned heavily on his staff. Come with me, my boy, he said to the gnome, and do not worry, your life quest will be fulfilled. But now the orb must be taken before the Council of Whitestone.
Yeah, exactly. So Fizban's sitting here going like, I have seen something that makes even me, the god of good, suddenly out of sorts. That's a heavy moment. But it leads right into one of the heaviest chapters in the book, right? Like, it's hardcore.
Chapter 5 ends with Taz crying and Fizban comforting him and saying, yeah, important people have decisions to make.
Yeah. And so we're going to take our break here really quickly. Shout out all of our patrons at patreon.com/Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, because we are grateful to each and every one of you who helps us and supports us, like I said at the head of the show. Without your support, we can't put this on because this stuff is expensive and it takes a lot of time. Thank you to our patrons, Alexander Lewis, Nicholas Campos, Wardango, Chris Andrew, Jason Bledsoe, Brandon Brown, John Merlino Jr., Jan Newhoff, Andrew Arsenault, Todd Fisher, and Iskender Bilge.
Thank you guys so much.
We appreciate each and every single one of you. But now, Chapter 6, the Council of Whitestone, an important person.
An important person. They give us a date here, the 28th of December, an actual date. I didn't even know they had December on Krynn.
Yeah, Krynn has a lot of calendars, and at this point, I don't think they'd solidified that there are actual Solomonic months and stuff they could use. But we have used this date, the 28th of December, and the few other handful of dates that they mentioned as like cornerstones of setting up a lot of like how the moons work and how the calendar work and how the whole system works.
This December, you too can celebrate Famine Day, the first winter after Cataclysm.
On the 28th of December, right before New Year's, feel free to celebrate Famine Day. But I mean, it's good that they have a midwinter celebration to remember that they survived, right? Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
I love those little flavor bits.
We learned that the last time the Council of Whitestone met was when the Elvish refugees showed up on southern Urgoth and the arrival of the dragon armies in Solamnia.
So it must have been around like the beginning of Autumn Twilight.
All the members were present then, and we learned that the voting members are the knights, the gnomes, and the hill dwarves, the seafaring folk of northern Urgoth, and the Solamnic exiles from Sandcrest. And then elves, mountain dwarves, and Kender are like advisory members where they can talk and they can offer advice, but they don't get to vote on anything.
Yeah, it's a kind of a weird amalgamation of choices there. The mountain dwarves being inside Thorbarden, I guess they wouldn't really need to have a thing. The Urgothians who are left, who are like now just like, sea pirates and everything like that, they only show up a handful of times, like Theros Ironfeld and Maquesta Carthon later on and stuff like that. But these guys are just like here. So we've got human, dwarves, and more humans.
And the elves are just, all elves are just like lumped together, even though we know that there are at least 3.
There are like 5+ elven groups, like
at this point there are 3.
Right, there are 3 land living elven groups that we can specifically speak of here because they don't add more until later.
And that meeting did not go well at all.
Think about that as human racism right there. It's like, oh yeah, elves.
They're all the same.
Brown haired ones and the blue haired ones, it's fine. Who cares?
That meeting went badly with the mountain and the hill dwarfs arguing. This is before that they had been united. I guess the hill dwarfs still wouldn't be united under Thorbarden.
No, I mean,
because that's not like their thing. The hill dwarves don't care.
They don't care. The hill dwarves hate the mountain dwarves because the mountain dwarves shut the doors of Thorbarden during the cataclysm and left the hill dwarves out there to die. Originally, the hill dwarves and the mountain dwarves were all part of the same kind of clan, and the hill dwarves were one of the groups that decided they preferred the sky rather than the stone as their ceiling. That's why they call themselves the Nidar. The Dwarven Nation trilogy is one of my absolute favorite trilogies. But anyways.
Yeah, the Sylvanesti only showed up to ensure that Qualinesti didn't form alliance with the Solamnians.
Yeah.
No one helped anyone.
Yeah, you can tell this is early because Ohana is there. And actually, the beginning of the book of Winter Night, when Ohana is in Tarsus and they're trying to leave, she is coming back from that first council.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was cute that said no one helped anyone, though the Kenders had offered but were politely declined. Kenders are always trying to help, and no one appreciates how great Kenders are.
Especially since Krynn and Thistlenut is one of the coolest Kenders in Dragonlance in the games and in the other stories and stuff. He's cool. I love him. Of course, everybody else is just polite and complete racist to him. It's super mean.
Lord Gunther has higher hopes for this second meeting. They had the orbs now. The Qualinesti were bringing Elistan. The elves had already arrived. No one could reach the dwarves. But Lord Gunther was still thinking that the elves and the humans could unite. And we learned very quickly that before the meeting even begins, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, like Gunther's sitting there putting his armor on. His aide comes up to him and is like, the elves have sent a message. Gunther goes out and talks to Lord Michael, one of his assistants. Michael sits there and says, like, we got word from the elves that they're going to demand the return of the dragon orb, and if not, they're going to go to war to recover it. And Gunther's like, what the hell are you talking about? Why would they go to war with us?
And he's like, how do you know this? And he's like, well, our source is Elistan. And here's Elistan. We also learn here that, again, Elistan is now a hunky guy.
Yeah, like what happened? He was like a Weasley weenie in the
dying old man, and now he's like...
Turns out he had found the word of the gods and has become young and hale again.
Gunther compares him to a knight.
Yeah, and I'm like, damn, dude, what happened?
Being a cleric of Paladine must have some benefits, huh?
Being the cleric of Paladine. Because Paladine's like, I need you to live long enough to get the word out, so we're going to kind of super saiyan you for a few minutes here.
And Elistan said he tried to convince the elves to join the humans. He could barely get them to come to the council at all, and they're only coming to give an ultimatum.
Love that for us.
And then we also learn that the people of Palanthas asked the knights, the whole army of knights, the ones that Derek and Sturm are leading, they asked them to, can you please go away? Your presence is making our negotiations with the Draconians difficult.
It seriously compromises our position, end quote. And it's like, what the hell? And this is where you realize that the Knights of Solamnia may have once ruled Solamnia, but they do not rule Solamnia now. They're just kind of an arbitrary group of old guys who sits and do these rituals and have armor and walk around and stuff. But the feudal system in Solamnia is completely fallen apart. The government system in Solamnia is a bunch of city-states, Palanthas, Solanthas, and all the other ones. And then like the various knighthood fiefdoms that kind of just deal with each other. It's wild because like suddenly Derek and his knights are occupying the High Clerist Tower, which is their stronghold. The High Clerist used to be the head of the Sword Knights, and it's this big tower that kind of blocks the pass going into Palanthas. They also got 1,000 footmen from Throttle, which is one of the former Solamnic lands that was now taken over by the dragon armies. And so those guys end up being like the bulk of their just generic soldiers.
And they don't have enough. They said they need more people to actually keep the army of the Draconians out. Oh, it's a defensible position if we just had more people.
Yeah, it's like if I had 2,000 knights, I could hold the thing. With 1,000, we're going to die.
Yeah.
Gunther turns to Elisand's like, so what's your counsel, Cleric? And Cleric's like, well, the book says evil turned on itself. And Gunther's like, great. Thanks. Love that.
To enter the council with hope, he leaves. And then Gunther asks, like, hey, what do you think of this Elistan? And Michael says, oh, he seems like a cleric of old. He could stand on the battlefield and call down Paladine's blessings. He wears a medallion none has worn since a cataclysm, but he needs proof before he believes anything. Gunther says, we have always been a people who look to the gods for our hope, a people of faith who distrusted magic. Yet now we look to magic for that hope, and when a chance comes to renew our faith, we question it.
I love that line. It's so good. It's so cinematic. It's like, Gunther's like, oh, I don't have time for this guy. But of course, this is the guy we should be having the most time for.
There's from the New Testament where it's like, Lord, I want to believe, help you my unbelief, right? Like he's saying, I want to believe, but I can't. So I need some reason to believe. You got to help me here.
These guys have been presented with a solution to their faith problems. And he's like, yeah, but I have practical problems. Like the elves want to kill us. Can we talk about that? And the fact that Elistan is like the most namby-pamby cleric here who's just like, well, let me read the discs. And it's like, I don't care about the discs, dog. Like, we have a problem.
We learn about the Glade of Whitestone. It's a holy magical place that was unchanged by the cataclysm, and it is always spring. It doesn't say why it's a holy place, just that it is a holy place. There's like a special white stone there. And
here's what it says, is because of the fact that this white rock is where, when Vinus Solamnus was creating the Knights of Solamnia, this is where he met the three gods of good who came down and taught him to create the orders.
Got it.
They mentioned that briefly and in passing, that this is like, that's why the white stone is important to the knights, is that this is where...
It says the king priest of Istar himself had blessed a huge rock that sat in the middle of a perpetually green glade, declaring it sacred to the gods and forbidding any mortal being to touch it.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Another line in here somewhere, which is like, oh, I guess that was in one of the footnotes, but that's why the glade, a holy sacred place, is because this is the place where the knights first were founded. This is where, Huma meets a stag. This is where a lot of important sacred events. And when the gods of good came down, they touched this granite pillar that Solamnus was meditating in front of and turned it into this pure white glowing rock. The king priest's blessing, the god's blessing itself, keeps his glade in perpetual kind of spring. Even after the cataclysm, when all the magic and gods went away, this thing stayed holy and sacred because it stayed spring here, which is amazing. This is also why the knights have an important outpost in their leadership on Sancrist, even though this is so far away from the knight homelands and like the Urgothian Empire. It's on between them and the knighthood. It's because of the fact that this is their one sacred outpost, and it has stayed kind of the knights' personal domain.
The elves have arrived, so the Speaker of the Sun and Portheos are here. Ahana's betrothed, Lord Queenoth, and all of his people are there. And then we learn about Mir Carthon of Northern Urgoth. He must be one of those sailors, right?
Yeah. Basically, all of these, like the Northern Urgothians, are basically the black people of Anslon, and they're also known for being sailors and pirates and stuff because they live a seafaring lifestyle. They're basically what's left of the original Urgothian Empire.
And then Cerdin Mar Thasal, who is a Solamnian from Sancrist, right?
Yeah. Representing the exiles on Sancrist. Because like Lord Gunther himself is like basically all the people, the refugees who fled to Sancrist, he's their representative.
Oh, Fizban has also shown up. They're sitting there. Fizban, Taz, Gnosh arrive. They set the orb before Gunther. And before they can even start the meeting, the Speaker of the Sun gets up. And He delivers their ultimatum. He says, all three tribes have spoken together and for the first time since the Kinslayer Wars are united. They will have the orb or there will be war. And Gunther's like, no, we're good. Laurana was bringing it to the knights. He says, your daughter. And then the speaker disowns his daughter. He just says, I don't have a daughter. Yeah, and the meeting gets to an awful start. It just starts falling apart. And Taz is sitting there hoping Elistan or Fizban will do something. And they don't. And it's all couched in like this language. They're not all saying like, we hate you and we're going to kill you. All couched in
polite racism.
Yeah, diplomatic.
Like they just make cutting remarks about each other, and they're definitely there's nobody here who's trying to actually work towards a solution. Taz is desperately looking around. He's like, man, somebody could do this. Laurana could do this. Sturm could do this. Someone could. Why did the crazy old mage bring me? Taz looked at the mage hopefully, but Fizban's asleep. Taz is like, wake up, someone's got to do something.
There's this funny line I love where it says, Gnosh, his report held fast in his hand, began to realize he wasn't going to be asked to give it.
Can you imagine just how crushing that is? You finally get a chance to see the thing that your whole life is based around. You've written this long report. You're going to get presented at a conference, and they're like, "Sorry, we're actually going to war right now. We'll come back to that. Table that for a moment." And Nosh is just like, "No." So when Solastarin's like, "I don't have a daughter," Taz snaps. He's just like, "No, because he's like. He remembers Laurana fighting to get the orb, fighting against Fealthas to get the orb, get it out of friggin' Ice Reach, go through fighting the dragons, all the things, and then to be cast off by her own people as she's desperately trying to save them. Taz is like, F this S, I am not here for this. And he's like, stop this right now and listen to me. And suddenly he saw to his astonishment that everybody had stopped talking and was now staring at him. And now that he had an audience, he realized he didn't have anything to say to all these important people, but he had to say something. After all, he thought, this is my fault. I read about those damn orbs. Gulping, he slides off his bench and walked towards the Whitestone, and the two hostile groups clustered around it. He thought he saw out of the corner of his eye Fizban grinning from under his hat. Ah, the old mage!
Taz is like, I demand to represent my people.
Yeah, and everybody's like, that's what you want? Really? That's what you stopped us for? And then Taz immediately is looking at these guys, and he knows what to do. Taz begins to shake with fear. Taz, who has fought dragons, stood up to gods, is finally terrified of what he's got to do right now.
No one ever takes us seriously. I understand why. We're a little flaky, and we can't follow through.
We don't have a strong sense of responsibility.
Cause lots of trouble. Occasionally, some of us do happen to acquire certain things which aren't ours. But one thing that Kinders know is he runs up, grabs the orb, and tosses it right at the Whitestone rock, and it shatters.
The round, gleaming crystal, its inside swirling in agitation, hung suspended in the air for long, long seconds. Taz wondered if the orb had the power to halt its flight, but it was just a fevered impression in the Kender's mind. The dragon orb struck the rock and shattered, bursting into 1,000 sparkling pieces. For an instant, a ball of milky white smoke hung in the air, trying desperately to hold itself together. Then the warm, spring-like breeze of the glade caught it and swept it apart. That was the white dragon orb that just got shattered.
Taz says, we know, he said in a small voice that dropped into the dreadful silence like a tiny drop of rain. We should be fighting dragons, not each other. No one moved, no one spoke. Then there was a thump. Gnosh had fainted.
And then suddenly, both sides go completely crazy. They grab Taz. The elves hold him on one side, the humans on the other. Porthios grabs his sword and he's like, we are going to split your ass in half.
Yeah, they're going to kill him.
You have ruined us all. You've led us to death. This is the end of all things. And then a sleepy voice like, no, nobody's going to die. And at least not at this moment. Quit waving that sword around, Porthios. Someone will get hurt. Taz peers out to see Fizban yawning, step over the inert body of the gnome and totter towards them. Elves and humans make way for him to pass as if compelled to do so by an unseen force.
Porthios threatens him, says he'll kill him as well. And his sword...
It just suddenly has thorns in the handles. And
so he drops it. Fizban is giving everyone a dressing down. He says, Porthios, you're a pretty good guy.
Maybe in a couple of years when you grow up and mature a little, we can talk again.
The speaker raised good kids, but he's a fool now. And he includes Tanis in the kids he raised.
Yeah, he's like, you raised 3 fine children. Oh yeah, you brought up Tanis Half-Elven too. Solstarin, between the 4 of these young people, we might yet save the world. You raised them. You raised Lorana. You raised Tanis. You don't get to back out of that.
You were a good man about 200 years ago.
Yeah. They go back to their seats, and Fizban stands up. He looks at Taz, and he's like, go handle Gnosh. Gnosh needs some help. You deal with that. Taz is miserable. He's like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about your life quest and your father's soul and everything, but there was nothing else to do. Fizban turns around and he's like, yeah, I'm going to lecture you. You deserve it. Every damn one of you. So don't sit there looking self-righteous. That Kender, he points at Taz, has more brains beneath that ridiculous top knot of his than all of you lot put together. Do you know what would happen if that Kender hadn't had the guts to do what he did? Do you? Well, I'll tell you. Let me find a seat here. Ah, yeah, there it is. Nodding in satisfaction, the old mage toddles over and sits down on the ground, leaning his back against the sacred Whitestone. The Whitestone we were told that no mortal can touch.
The knights gasp in horror. Gunther leaped to his feet, appalled at the sacrilege. No mortal can touch the Whitestone, he yelled. And Fizban goes, one more word, and I'll make your mustaches fall off. Now sit down and shut up.
He sits there, he's like, oh yeah, I was going to tell you a story. One of you would have won the orb, and you would have taken it either to keep it safe or save the world. And yeah, it is capable of saving the world, but only if you know how to use it. Who of you has this knowledge? Who has this strength? The orb was created by the greatest, most powerful magicians of old. All the most powerful. Do you understand? It was created by those of the white robes and those of the black robes. This is the essence of evil and good. The red robes brought those essences together and bound them with their force. A few there are now with the power and strength to understand the orb, to fathom its secrets, to gain mastery over it. Few indeed, and Fizban's eyes gleamed, and none who sit here.
Yeah, no, he passed out in a wagon on the other side of the world. That's where he is.
Yeah, right? Like, one of you would have found the orb and used it, and you would have found that you hurled yourself upon disaster. You would have been broken as surely as the Kender broke the orb. And for hope being shattered, I tell you, hope was lost for a time, but now it's been born, and a sudden gust of wind catches the old man's hat and blows off his head. As he's kneeling down to pick it up, the sun breaks through the clouds, and there's a blazing flash of silver, followed by a splintering, deafening crack as though the land itself had split apart. Half blinded by the flaring light, the people blinked and gazed in fear and awe at the terrifying sight before their eyes. The Whitestone had been split asunder. The old magician lay sprawled at the base, his hat clutched in his hand, his other arm flung over his head in terror. Above him, piercing the rock where he'd been sitting, was a long weapon made of gleaming silver. It had been thrown by the silver arm of a black man who walked over to stand beside it. Accompanying him were 3 people, an elven woman dressed in leather armor, an old white-bearded dwarf, and Elistan. Amid the stunned silence of the crowd, the black man reached out and lifted the weapon from the splintered remains of the rock. He lifted the weapon high above his head, and the silver barbed point glittered brightly in the rays of the midday sun. I am Theros Ironfeld, the man called out in a deep voice, and for the last month I have been forging these. He shook the weapon in his hand. I've taken molten silver from a well hidden deep within the heart of the mountain of the monument of the silver dragon. With the silver arm given to me by the gods, I have forged the weapon as legend foretold. And this I bring you, to all the people of Krynn, that we may join together and defeat the great evil that threatens to engulf us in darkness forever. I bring you the Dragon Lance. And with that, Theros thrust the weapon deep into the ground. It stood straight and shiny amidst the broken pieces of the dragon orb. God, I love that.
Dragon lances can break rocks, huh?
Dragon lances are insanely powerful items. In first edition, they could channel the breath weapons of the dragons. They could do all these. I mean, they were sick. They were so cool.
And that's how chapter 6 ends.
Oh, what a way to end the chapter, man. Finally, after like a book and a half, we get the Dragon Lance itself.
The elf with him is Lorana, right? It's not Silvara, yeah. And the dwarf is not Flint. That is Theros, right? That's the king of the mountain dwarves? Because he would need their hammer, right?
No, he doesn't need it because he says so in the next chapter that the old-timey people needed it, but the technology is advanced enough that they don't need it.
Oh, okay. Wondered how Theros managed to run all the way back to Thorpe Arden, get the hammer, and run.
Like, they just got it back. You think they're just going to give it to a random human that just shows up?
Turns out they don't need it when you have a silver arm. You could just use that.
Yeah, it turns out they're actually just good at this. Yeah, we aren't told who the dwarf is, but I'm pretty sure...
It's Flint, right?
It is Flint, yeah. It's absolutely Flint.
Okay.
It says so on like the first page of the next chapter.
Okay. All right, that is chapter 6. Thank you for joining us today.
The way the Dragonlance is introduced, though, man, I love that so much. It's like a big epic thing has just happened. The one item we know will save the world has been destroyed, and suddenly, out of nowhere, finally, the titular weapon of this series that's been, dangled in front of us forever.
A whole book and a half.
Yeah. I was reading an article and I was like, oh, I can tell these people have never read Dragonlance before, because they're like, oh man, if they make Dragonlance into a series, a lot of dragons and stuff are going to die. I'm like, there are like no dragons in the Chronicles, dude.
I mean, there's like 3 dragons.
The like Dragonlance doesn't show up until like 10 years later. It's just, yeah.
It's so good.
Oh, it's so good.
Way to destroy this holy site that has lasted forever.
Yeah, for like literal thousands of years.
First Fizban, like, according to them, sacrileges, like he destroys the sacredness of it by leaning against it. And then Theros just obliterates the rock or splits it in two. We've talked before about how Sturm kind of represents the meaning of the law instead of the outward forms of it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, here we see this. They have this respect for this place without understanding what that, like why it needs to be respected.
Yeah.
They have the outward forms of holiness and righteousness, but they're not actually doing in it. And so we see here the people of good, like destroying these symbols, letting people know, like, hey, good doesn't exist in a stone.
Right.
Good is not the law code that you make for yourself. Good is doing good.
Yeah. Like it turns out, if you're just keeping these rituals but not having any meaning behind them, then you are not actually doing. And this is like, this is definitely a Lutheran kind of stance here, which is like, you need to actually do the action to get the reward. You can't just stand there and expect that good things are going to happen for you. This is definitely one of those like, hey, dude, you're holding this site sacred for what? What is the purpose here, right? Like, what is the value?
What change has that sacredness caused in you to make you do good? And if it hasn't caused you to do good, then it's done nothing.
Right. How valuable is this? Like, what is the point if y'all ain't going to do anything with it? And I thought that was just an incredibly powerful moment there, where the alliance of good is basically just sitting there like going, oh, damn. Yeah, we boffed that one, didn't we?
Yeah, it's a great chapter.
Yeah.
And it gets even better in chapter 7, An Unexpected Journey. Thank you for listening. Next month, join us again. As always, you can find our Blue Sky accounts, Facebook group, Discord link, all in our show notes, as well as our Patreon. As always, Shivam, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next time. Hello, and welcome to the Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, where we go book by book, chapter by chapter through the
Chronicles of Dragonlance, really?
I was going to say through the Dragonlance novels. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, eventually someday.
It's the secret. I'm putting out into the world what I want to be real.
You know what? If these books weren't so interesting, we wouldn't be able to go chapter by chapter.
Oh,
but
yeah,
they're
no.
really interesting, and this is fun to do. Not every Dragonlance book is going to be this fun, so we're going to be able to kind of like summarize and go through. But that's like 6 books from now, because I figure we're going to go chapter by chapter through Legends too.
Probably.
I kind of want to do that.
Yeah, I am.
Maybe even like Dragons of Summer Flame. I don't know.
I keep hoping that maybe the chapters get smaller, and then we can do like 3 chapters per episode.
I mean, the thing is, to be fair, the first 6 books are roughly the same size.
Yeah.
It's not until like the later ones where it gets like gigantic.
Okay, I'm going to do this intro again. We're going to take some of this because I didn't even introduce myself or you.
They know who we are.
This was neat because they
Incoming voice call from +1 916 475 6071.
Sorry about that phone call.